Title Before the Sails. Life on the oldest continent. Imagine a civilization so old that, when the pyramids were built, it was already older than the pyramids are to us today. A civilization that survived ice ages, rising seas, and continental droughts. A civilization that never fell. It is not a myth. It is not a lost city. It is still here. And in the year 1770, it had already been here for 2,000 generations. This is the story of the oldest living culture on Earth, and the life they lived on the world's driest continent before a strange ship appeared on the horizon. 65,000 years. Pause on that number for a moment. Modern humans only left Africa around 70,000 years ago. Within 5,000 years of that, people had already reached Australia. Crossing open sea in boats we still do not know how to reproduce. They arrived on a continent unlike any other on the planet. And here is the part that still stuns scientists today. They figured it out. The land they inherited was not one place, but a dozen places stitched together. In the tropical north, monsoon rains drummed on paperbark forests, where saltwater crocodiles slid through mangrove channels. In the center, red deserts stretched beyond the curve of the horizon, where spinifex grass caught the wind and kangaroos bounded across salt pans older than memory. In the southeast, cool rivers cut through fern gullies, and eucalyptus forests rose into cloud. Along 4 coastlines, reefs bloomed, and great whales passed each year on their ancient roads. Now, here is a question most people get wrong. How many Aboriginal nations lived on this continent? 1? 10? The answer is more than 250. 250 distinct nations, speaking 250 distinct languages, as varied from one another as Italian is from Japanese. The Eora around what would one day become Sydney, the Wiradjuri of the inland plains, the Yolngu of Arnhem Land in the north, the Noongar of the southwest, the Palawa of Lutruwita, the island now called Tasmania. Each nation held deep knowledge of its own country, the plants, the animals, the water, the stars above, and the stories that bound all of these together. So how did they live? Here is where it gets interesting. In the dry months, a family might build a simple curved shelter of bent saplings and bark, easy to raise, easy to leave behind. But in the southwest of what is now Victoria, the Gunditjmara people built something almost no one in the world has ever heard of. Villages. Real villages. Of circular stone houses. Beside an engineered network of channels and ponds at a place called Budgebim. How old are these stone houses? They are older than the pyramids of Giza. And they are still standing. And then there is the land itself. The early European explorers wrote in their journals that Australia looked like an English country park. Open grassland, scattered trees, plentiful game. They assumed this was wild, untouched nature. They were wrong. What they were walking through was a 65,000-year-old garden. The people had shaped it, on purpose, with fire. It is called firestick farming. A skilled practitioner could walk across a grassland and, in a single afternoon, set a cool, careful burn that cleared old growth without harming the soil. The new shoots that followed drew in kangaroos and wallabies. A mosaic of burned and unburned patches fed both the hunters and the forests. For tens of thousands of years, an entire continent was kept alive this way. The untouched wilderness was a lie the newcomers told themselves. They simply could not see the gardeners. And speaking of food, here is a fact that may change how you think about the history of the world. Where was the oldest bread on earth baked? Not in Egypt. Not in Mesopotamia. Right here. Grinding stones have been unearthed in Central Australia, showing that Aboriginal women were pounding native grass seeds into flour and baking flatbread in the coals 30,000 years before the first farmers of the Fertile Crescent. 30,000 years. The oldest bread in the world is Australian. Now let's talk about tools. A hunter carried a spear tipped with stone or bone, and a carved wooden tool called a woomera. What did the woomera do? It doubled the length of his arm. A spear thrown with a woomera could travel 100 paces with lethal accuracy. The boomerang carved from a curve of hardwood was not a toy. It could stun birds rising from reed beds, or be used in ceremony, or be traded between clans for hundreds of miles. Everything had a purpose. Nothing was wasted. Water. Water was everything. And the people knew every soak, every spring, every hidden rock pool in country that a visitor would walk past and never see. At Brew Arena on the Barwon River, generations built low stone walls across the shallows. Fish traps so cleverly engineered that they still funnel fish today. How old are these fish traps? 40,000 years. That is older than writing, older than agriculture, older than the wheel. And they still work. Along the coasts, men and women wove bark into canoes light enough to lift with one hand, tight enough to carry a fire burning on a clay pad right there in the bow. They fished at night by the light of that small flame, spearing mullet and bream from water, as still as a mirror. Now look up. When night fell, the sky above them was not a decoration. It was a map, a calendar, a library, and a law, all at once. They saw the dark shape of a giant emu stretched along the dust lanes of the Milky Way, and by the emu's changing position through the year, they knew exactly when to collect its eggs. They traced what they called songlines across the sky, and the same songlines ran across the land below. These were invisible paths, stretching for 1,000 miles or more, that a traveler could follow from waterhole to waterhole, guided by nothing but the verses of a song handed down from grandparent to grandchild. No paper, no map, no compass, just memory and song. This is the part people most often miss. How was all this knowledge kept alive without writing? By singing it, by walking it, by living it. A single song could contain the location of every waterhole across 1,000 kilometers of desert. Lose the song and you lose the water. The stakes were that simple and the system was that strong. Who taught the children? Everyone did. A child was raised not only by a mother and father, but by aunties, uncles, and the elders of the whole camp. Obligations ran in careful patterns. Who could speak to whom? Who married into which group? Who carried responsibility for which story? These laws were older than the coastlines the people still remembered from before the seas rose at the end of the last ice age. Think about that. They still told stories of the world from before the ocean was where it is today. Some of those stories have now been verified by geologists. They were right. And here is one more thing most people don't know. Trade. A seashell from the warm Kimberley coast in the far north could pass from hand to hand through dozens of nations and end up years later tied to a string around the neck of a woman 3,000 kilometers inland in the dry heart of the continent. How? Through a trade web older than any empire. Red ochre from a single sacred quarry traveled further than any Roman road ever reached. Songs traveled with the goods. Stories traveled with the songs. 65,000 years. 2,000 generations. Glaciers came and went. Coastlines drowned and re-emerged. Volcanoes erupted in the southeast within living memory of stories still told today. Through all of it, the people walked their country, burned it gently, sang it into the next generation, and kept the old laws. This is, without exaggeration, the longest unbroken conversation between a people and a place that has ever happened on this planet. And then, one bright autumn morning in April of 1770, a fisherman on the rocks near what is now Botany Bay looked up from his spear and saw something out at sea, a great pale shape, wider than any canoe had ever been, moving without paddles. Coming closer, he did not yet have a word for what he was seeing. He turned, and he went to tell the elders. The oldest story on Earth was about to meet a new one. But that is a story for another day.